You are live.
Good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the Sunset Safari on this, the very last day of May 2016 in the Common Era. My name is James Hendry, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do, I'm sorry, I have returned from leave. You thought you were rid of me, but alas, you were incorrect. Here I am. On camera today, also returned from leave, Bryan, the Thumb, 6'4", Joubert. Returned from Johannesburg this very morning. We're fresh as daisies. We're wilting winter daisies, of course, and ready to take you on a sunset safari here in the middle of the iconic Kruger National Park. And you would have seen from the first shot there, things have become quite dry. Now, for the regular viewers, of course, you'll have been watching this and watching the grass go slowly from the sort of, it was quite a nice autumnal green when I left, and go to this kind of much more golden yellow colour that it is now. That, of course, will continue as we go into the dry season. It's only just about June, and so we've got another 3 or 4 months of dryness to come, and so I think things are going to look pretty rough by the time we get our first rains with any luck in November. I'm going to try not to talk too much about that, because by the time those rains do come about, I will be hoarse from mentioning it. Now, you are on a live safari. If you're wondering who this fellow is blethering to you into the screen, you are on a very live safari in the middle of the Kruger National Park, and we would like to talk to you. I don't wish to talk to you all afternoon. I wish you to talk to me as well. Hashtag SafariLive if you can tweet. If you're unable to tweet and are emailing, well, then send us an email at questions@wildearth.tv. Otherwise, just sit along and enjoy the ride. We're going to go and see what we can find. Not much found on Nkuhuma this morning. There are some beautiful buffalo bulls just sort of lying in the sun here, and they've changed their sort of modus operandi, because they would normally in the heat of the day be lying in the water. Well, water, of course, not much water, mostly their own detritus, but that's where they'd be cooling down. And now, because we're into the winter, they're lying out in the sun, enjoying the warm winter rays that we have here. And winter, of course, in this part of the world, an entirely relative term. For most of you, of course, winter is not a place you want to be outside during the middle of the day. But here, it's a balmy 24 degrees Celsius, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, must put us at around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. 76 degrees Fahrenheit. In the final control today, shouting at me when I get things like the Fahrenheit temperature wrong, Kirsten McLennan-Smith. She's being ably assisted by Geraldine, the Cheesecake Kent, of course, and I was very disappointed to find that Geraldine had not made a cheesecake for the return of Bryan and I. Bryan, you were quite upset about that, weren't you? Yeah. His face is a picture. Anyway, what we're going to do is go from waterhole to waterhole for most of the afternoon and see what we can find there, and then we'll just figure things out as we go along. Here we go, Bryan. Are you ready?
I'm very ready.
Good. Well, Wendy seems semi-ready. Wendy is this recalcitrant old bag that I'm driving, and she's still going, amazingly. I didn't think she'd last the next 2 weeks, but here she is, and off we go. Our first stop will be at not Twin Dams, at Treehouse Dam. Hello, Aaron in New Zealand. Thank you very much for your welcome back. Not so many thanks for piling on the pressure at this early stage of our work cycle. You say that we're going to have to try and top. Oh, hello. Did you miss me? Yes, I'm sure you did. I cannot blame you. It's a buffalo bull, everybody. He's sitting very close to us, only about 4 meters or so, 12 feet. He's very relaxed. He was very relaxed. He's decided that Bryan and I are sufficiently unfamiliar for him to move off. Well, Aaron, not quite the pangolin you were suggesting we try and top, that Brent and Dave managed to find on Cheetah Plains. What a wonderful sighting that was. But we did find you a buffalo, Aaron. Well, I think we'll call that quits, eh, Bryan? Mm. I mean, we haven't seen a buffalo for a while.
No, 2 weeks. This is
a splendid sighting. And a red-billed oxpecker. That is the bird, everybody, crawling about on his head. And we often get asked about those white stripes underneath the eyes. Well, those white stripes from that very bird, pecking away at the ticks and probably trying to get a bit at the flesh, the soft flesh under the eye. Righty. That was a wonderful first sighting, wasn't it, Bryan? On we go. Come on, old Wendy. Here we go. that rather large hiatus. We're just pulling into Buffalo's Hook Dam here, where appropriately there are a lot of buffles. And we just wanted to get you eye level with them so you can see them from this sort of angle. Bryan, is that horrible? Shall I try and... is it okay? So it's quite a large herd of buffalo that are coming down to Buffalo's Hook Dam, which is marvellous. Most pleased to have them. I must just apologise again, not sure what happened to the stream. It died. It has been resurrected by the brilliance of Peter Braat all the way from Cape Town. He is the only productive human being in Cape Town, of course, and so therefore we don't mind that he lives there. But this herd is getting bigger and bigger, and I you know, around here, I've yet to see particularly large herds of buffalo. And so it's quite nice to see a herd this size. There are probably about 200 of them coming through here, I would reckon. Did you say, Bryan?
No. Give or take.
Give or take. Very nice. A vast expanse, Bryan, of beefaloes. Of course, Bryan and I wouldn't have seen many beefaloes on our leave, would we, Bryan? They don't occur greatly in Johannesburg, nor do they occur greatly in the Eastern Cape, where I was. But I did see some, quite interestingly, some elephants in the Eastern Cape, and they were sitting on a river that I was very privileged to travel up. And it's a salt river, so they don't drink from it, but they do like to frolic and swim in it during the hot days. And I've yet to see a decent elephant swimming here. And every time I come to Buffalo's Hook and find elephants, I hope that they're going to sort of take a merry swim, but I've yet to see it happen. There's also a hippopotamus here. The buffalo are not alone. There he is. And he was standing up out of the water when we arrived, looking most upset that 200 buffalo had descended on his place of refuge. And he's watching them with sort of ill intent. So if you have just wandered across to this stream and wondering what on earth this is that you're watching, you're on a live safari. We're back again after about a 45-minute sort of delay due to various technical glitches. And please do talk to us if you'd like to. Ask us questions about where we are in the world, how we came to be where we are, and we'll be more than happy to tell you a bit about what we do, or answer any questions that you might have about the animals you're seeing. You can do that through Twitter, #SafariLive, or questions@wildearth.tv if you're on the email. And behind us you can hear the wonderful call of the grey go-away bird going wah, which of course translates in bird speak to go away. It's part of a very colourful group of birds called the turacos, this one being the least colourful bird we get anywhere. Plain grey it is. Hello, Dustin in Arkansas. You want to know what the birds are that hang around on the backs of the buffalo? Well, Dustin, it's not only the buffalo. They hang around on the backs of the nyala and the impala and... What was that? Justin, not Dustin. Sorry, Justin. Nyala, impala, rhino even. Just about all the antelope except the very small ones these oxpeckers will hang around on. And they do that because they like to eat ticks. Well, they don't so much like to eat ticks, but they do like to drink the blood that the ticks have pulled out of the buffalo. And so what they'll do is they'll sit around on animals like this, and of course there are plenty of ticks and other ectoparasites that cover the bodies of animals like this. And when there's a wound opened up, the oxpeckers will peck at the wound and sort of take out bits and pieces of flesh, and it's largely the blood that they're after. And so we get two kinds here, most commonly the red-billed oxpecker, and then we also get the yellow-billed oxpecker, but that's less common. In this area, I'd say probably 80% the red-billed and 20% the yellow-billed. The herd just keeps coming. There might be more than 200. Debbie, very nice question from you. And when I first heard this kind of fact, if you like, I thought precisely the same as you, that you thought it was counterproductive and counterintuitive, certainly. You say that Brent has said that the buffalo herds are banding together as we go into the winter. And you say it seems counterintuitive and counterproductive because there's less forage. Debbie, that's precisely why they are moving together. Remember, the water is going to be much more concentrated, so it'll be much more sparse and much more concentrated in specific areas. Likewise, the forage is not nearly as well distributed as it would be in the rainy season. They'll have to move further and further away from water towards concentrated areas of forage where there are sort of bits of remaining forage and bits of remaining grazing. And because of that, they band together. They move together to the concentrated water, and then they go off to forage into the, they have to move quite large distances away from the water. In summertime, think of it as there being lots of little pieces of water all over the place, small seasonal pans that the buffalo can go to, and then there'll be lots of different areas where the forage is good. And so these big herds that we're watching here now, I mean, they just keep coming. They will split up into much smaller groups during the summer months. So Debbie, I hope that makes sense to you. I know exactly what you mean. I felt precisely the same the first time I heard that buffalo herds were bigger in the winter, but it's unquestionably true. This is fantastic. This really is a magnificent sighting. Now they are doing a few modifications to the dams of this area. They've done Treehouse Dam, as many of you would have seen. They are busy with twin dams at the moment, and they'll be moving on to Buffelshoek Dam shortly. I'm not sure how much water there's going to be left in here once they're finished, but that is in preparation. Apparently, there's quite a few predictions that there are going to be vast floods this year. Predicting the weather, of course, is like trying to predict the behavior of a politician. And so I think it's quite a brave call, but we'll see what happens later this year. You can just maybe see the light starting to soften slightly. Brian, just quickly go across. There's a buffalo there. Looks like it's got a... Is that just a leaf in its mouth? Just moving through the mud at the end of the dam there?
Yeah.
A leaf. I thought it was a fish for a second. I thought that would have been very strange indeed. But it is a leaf, not a fish. They don't eat fish much, do they, Brian?
Not very often.
Not very often, no. No. I shall train my binoculars on it. Yes, not in fact a fish, but a leaf. Good. Would have been very interesting to see a buffalo with a fish, I feel. So what they'll do from here is they will go off and try and find some forage, have a bit of a graze, and then they'll lie down. And in the winter time, unlike during the summertime, what they'll do is they'll sleep at night. They'll huddle together, a little bit like penguins, if you like, in the Antarctic. They'll huddle together and sort of try and stay towards the middle of the herd for the duration of the cold night, and then they'll start to move as dawn breaks. And they'll keep moving, often for much of the day, because, of course, it doesn't get too hot at this time of the year. And Ashley, you say some of them look like they're looking a bit thin. Yeah, they're not looking too bad. I do agree there are one or two individuals that are looking a bit thin. That's purely a function of the forage, I think. I don't think it's a function of disease at all. If you go outside to the community areas at the moment, you'll see that many of the cattle in those areas are very emaciated indeed. So, I mean, they really are having a tough time. The water at or the forage outside in the communities is very poor. And so I think that's all this is, you know, it's always more delayed with the wild animals because they're much more used to these conditions, and the rangelands and these reserves are in much better health than those outside in the community grazing lands. But you'll find that, yeah, there's definitely one or two hips showing, but not nearly as many they're going to be. Hello, Cassie Lion. Cassie Lion, I'm not sure I've heard from you before. I like your name very much, Cassie Lion. You want to know if we get foot and mouth disease here? Yes, we do get foot and mouth disease here. We also get the people version of it called feet and hands. It's normally feet and hands and mouth disease in human beings. Of course, buffalo don't have hands, do they, Bryan? No. But yes, it does occur here every so often. I haven't heard of an outbreak in this area for a long time, and of course we're sort of the eastern side of a veterinary cordon fence, beyond which you can't take cattle out, and you can't take wild animals like these buffalo out of that cordon, and you can't bring them in either. So, you know, unless they've been destroyed or unless they've been to an abattoir and treated. So that kind of, I think, keeps away a lot of the foot and mouth. There have been outbreaks in South Africa, but I haven't heard of one recently amongst wild stock like this. So it is possible, yes, that it could come in here, but at the moment not so much. A friend of mine did get feet and hands and mouth disease the other day. It seems to go around the nursery schools of this area, and he has a little girl, and unfortunately she gave him that. He said it's not very nice at all. In fact, he said it was deeply unpleasant, but not in the buffalo so far. There's also a really brave grey heron just over there, Bryan. There we go. And he's just hoping, I suspect, a bit like a drongo would hope for a buffalo or an elephant to kick up invertebrates. I suspect this heron is hoping for some fish to come running his way that had been disturbed, or even frogs that had been disturbed by the buffalo's hooves churning up the mud. That's quite a nice picture there, isn't it, Bryan? Very pretty. Now, Jacob, you want to know where the term or the name Buffalo's Hook comes from. Jacob, I don't know rightly. I mean, it means buffalo corner, basically. And so I suspect it must come from the number of buffalo that are around the area. And so I suspect, Jacob, that it was probably just a name that somebody thought up. And we'll just show you on the map where it is now in relation to the rest of the reserve. Kirsten is going to put a map on the screen. So there is the map, and we're zooming into Buffalo's Hook now. And so that's where we are. And so that's the northeastern corner of Nkuhuma. And it is quite conveniently in the sort of corner, northeastern corner. So maybe that's why it's called. Well, except that the property to the north of us, of course, the reserve to the north of us is called Buffalo's Hook. And this dam is the closest place to Buffalo's Hook, but a lot of these names, of course, are lost in history somewhere. This vast herd of beefaloes just keeps on coming and coming and coming. And this is lovely. Question from someone called Red Dog. You want to know if buffalo horns continue to grow throughout their lives. Red Dog, they don't. I think the keratin probably keeps being replaced on the edge, but they certainly do reach their apogee probably at about 13 or 14 years. And then that keratin sheath tends to kind of wear off a bit. And so on the really old buffalo, their horns look beaten up, and they definitely haven't grown for a number of years. So you'll probably find that they stop growing at around maybe 12 years, actually. And then that keratin probably does get replaced, but maybe not that effectively as they get older. And the horns, of course, are attached to the skull. They're attached to the skull in the same way, completely unlike the antlers of, say, a moose or a deer. And the bit that you can see is bone covered in keratin. Now apparently the bushwalk is immobile at the moment. That is not because Stefan has tripped over a stick and broken an ankle, or indeed because Gendre has managed to injure one of his enormous soccer ball-sized calves. Oh no, they have got various technical glitches that they're trying to sort out at the moment, and so that's why we're not going to the bushwalk. You're stuck with me for the next little while, I'm afraid. And we are going to have a school drive at about 4:55, if I'm not mistaken, and that will go on till 5:25. Rosedale School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Rosemont, sorry. Rosedale, Rosemont, Rose Hill, Rose Tree, Bush, Mountain. The smell now is quite strong. It doesn't smell like buffalo. It smells like, can you smell that? It smells like waterbuck, doesn't it? This is interesting. Thank you, Ravi, for your question in New York. You want to know why is it that prey species tend to thrive more than prey species do? No, predator species do. Ravi, it's by virtue of the nature that they get eaten. At least that, that it's just how it works. So that's a terrible answer. There is more grass and more vegetation biomass than there are buffalo, for example. And in the same way, every time you move down the trophic pyramid, if you like, every time you move down towards an animal that eats more concentrated form of nutrients, so the fewer of them there will be. Because if they had too many of them, they'd quickly eat themselves out. And you find that balance is maintained. Simply, a predator's numbers is maintained almost exclusively by the number of prey that they have to eat, in the same way that the number of buffalo will be defined almost exclusively by the amount of grass that there is in a particular area. And it's simply because this area couldn't sustain a greater number of lions that they have, obviously within a certain interval. So, I mean, plus or minus, say, 20% of the lions that we have here could probably quite successfully survive. But above that, you'll start to see an immediate crash in the predator numbers, and then the prey numbers would drop at the same time. And you'll find that if you look at numbers, I mean, it's not that simple because there are many different factors that affect them. But what you'll find is that over time, so I'll draw a graph for you when we get to some sand. It's actually, I know graphs make most people go cold, but it's actually quite interesting. And you can see quite clearly how as prey numbers increase, so the predators' numbers sort of follow them, and then as the predator numbers get to a certain point, so the predator numbers, at least the prey numbers, will dive, and consequently so will the predator numbers. Does that make sense? I think I'm saying predator and prey in quite a confused fashion, but I'll draw you a nice picture of it. It's actually quite interesting to see how it works. Righty, I think that this buffalo herd has given us all that it is going to. It doesn't look like any of them are about to be savaged by a pride of lions, so I think we'll move on, shall we, Bryan? Now, I'm going to try and move on without creating some kind of auto accident. There's a very interesting array of clouds developing off to the eastern side, which we'll try and get a view of. Hello, Jesse. What a very nice question from you. And I think we can get some help from Bryan here because he flew in. But you want to know what the topography is like on the drive back from Johannesburg. So I normally drive. Bryan drives and flies. He doesn't fly himself, of course. He flies a commercial airliner, don't you, Bryan? Yes. The topography, Jesse, is... So, if we go from Johannesburg, it's about 600 kilometers, which is in miles... say about 450 miles from Johannesburg we are here. So we're on the high veld there. It's very high up, sort of about a mile high when you start, and it stays that high up until, in fact, it goes even higher to a place called Belfast, which is the highest town in South Africa, at about 2,000 meters above sea level, which is... Oh, it's so difficult doing these conversions if you are not used to it. It's about 1,200 miles. No, it's not. Divide by... I've now got to go to feet. 2,000 meters is just over about 7,000 feet above sea level is Belfast. So that whole area is farming. They farm sunflowers, they farm a bit of wheat, they farm a bit of maize, and there are also extensive coal mining operations there. And because of that, many of our coal-fired power stations are in that particular area. So up until you hit Belfast area, it's not very attractive at all. It's very flat. Then you get into the mountains, the sort of foothills of the Drakensberg, the escarpment that comes, eventually forms the escarpment that you will see as we go, as the sun starts to go down. And you go through beautiful areas, sort of highland, grassland areas. A place called Dullstroom, very famous for its trout farming, or trout fishing, and just sort of country retreats, if you like, just glorious vistas everywhere you look. Then you go through a place called Leidenberg, which is a completely lamentable settlement, but is surrounded by very beautiful hills everywhere. And then after that, you start to descend. You start to get a bit lower, and you get really in amongst these incredible cliffs as you go through Urgstad. Try and say that, Urgstad. And Urgstad used to be the seat of the government of the old Transvaal Republic. It's now a one-horse town, and I can tell you that there is no good coffee on offer in Urgstad. You can only buy chicory there, which is very sad. So between Dullstroom and Hoedspruit, there is not a good cup of coffee to be had. You must be aware of that, of course, if you're driving. And as you go down from Urgstad, you get into some community lands. There are some local people living in villages in amongst these absolutely spectacular hills. And then you get right into the mountains, and you go through what's called the Abel Erasmus Tunnel, and that's a tunnel through the Drakensberg. And as you get through this tunnel, the Lowveld just explodes out in front of you, and you can see hundreds of kilometers off to the east towards Mozambique, right over the Kruger National Park. And on a very clear day, apparently you can see into Mozambique from there. So that's what it's like. And then you descend down the pass and into the Lowveld and towards the town of Hoedspruit. And then the topography is very like this. It's very much sort of gentle, undulating, granitic topography. And that's the basic route from Johannesburg, 450 miles or so. Now, my plan from here is to head down towards where we had some elephants while you were on the technical loop. And Cecilia, you want to know about banana trees and whether there are any in this area. Well, there are no wild banana trees, but just to the south and to the west of us, near a town called Hazy View, there are many banana farms where they farm bananas, Bryan. Yes, yes. Very famous for banana farming. There is a bit of citrus farming around this area, around Hoedspruit, but otherwise more and more of these farms are becoming wildlife estates, and which eventually kind of join up to become very large game reserves. And Brent lives on a reserve called Leadwood, and that's 50,000 hectares now. It's almost the same size as the Sabi Sands, and that until about 10 years ago was farmland. So more and more of this area is being put back to wildlife, which is just wonderful. But I think there's a bit of a front moving in.
I do too.
Just try and get some height so that we might see the spectacular clouds. So we did have some elephants around Treehouse Dam, which now resembles the Kimberley Hole. And Debbie, I was wondering the same thing as you. You say it rained while I was gone, or while we were all gone. Kirsten, of course, is also back in the hot seat as of today. And you want to know if I think we might have a wet winter after such a dry summer. And I was wondering the same thing. I don't know that we can predict it. I sort of feel that a little bit in my bones, I must say. Bryan does too. And Bryan's finger, of course, starts to ache. He's waving it at me now. There it is. That's finger starts to ache when the pressure drops and the rain comes. So Bryan will warn us if any winter rains are going to come. Thank you, Bryan. Yeah, very kind of you. We're going to pop out onto the eastern boundary now, and we'll have a look off to the east and see these clouds coming in and see if there's a front. All the while keeping eyes on the road for twacks of interesting animals that we might be able to find. Of course, one does want to see Karula and her cubs after a prolonged absence from the area, so with any luck we'll see her too. There are some lion tracks here. Ooh, this is interesting. There are some lion tracks here. They look relatively fresh. A male and a female. I'll just jump out and show them to you quickly. We might just do a loop around and come back this way. Bryan. There we go. That should be all right. Hold on, everyone. One must also just check around when one sees lion tracks that the lions aren't in fact right here. Now I don't know if you can see the difference here, but here's the female. And I thought this was a male track, but it isn't. It's actually the other female track. She's just kind of slid slightly. And in soft sand like this, the tracks do get a little bit bigger. So that's her back foot, and here's her front foot. And because it's soft sand, it just kind of splays out a little bit, in the same way that it would if she walked in mud. There's another one there. There are at least two females here. They actually go... they go straight off in there. We'll do another loop. We'll go around and loop around back towards the dam, because they may well be following that herd of buffalo, although two females taking on a herd of beefalo that size are going to find themselves in trouble. They could very easily just be snoozing it up in the shade, really not far from here at all. Anyway, let's see what happens. We'll pop around the corner. I would say they're probably from last night. Yeah. We'll come back to this area. We'll just do a loop around first to see. They could, of course, be 5 kilometers away. But I know there has been quite a lot of lion activity around this area and into Torchwood. And of course, we do know that the Nkuhuma Pride lioness gave birth to 2 little cubs, and there's at least another pregnant female somewhere around the place. So maybe these guys are just moving to and from, maybe having a drink there, where they should have water in Torchwood. I don't see any further tracks coming out. So we'll just drive around and see what we can see there. I'm just trying to get a bit of height, because there's some really spectacular cloud formations. I'll drive a little bit faster, and we'll get a little bit higher up and look off to the east. Do tell me if you see a lion, everybody. I'd like to see a lion. I haven't seen a lion for a while, especially one with tiny little baby cubs. There we go. That's quite a nice indicator. Check this out, everyone. Isn't that spectacular, Bryan? I really think that's quite astonishing. That's the most bizarre sort of winter cloud formation. I mean, it's not as spectacular seeing Karula and her cubs, is it?
Almost.
It's almost, though. Yeah. I would agree that it's almost as spectacular. Right, well, we'll press on from here. That really is very pretty indeed. Righty, on we go. Also the call of the red-crested korhaan. Hello, Opie. A nice question that I'm easily able to answer. You say, what makes male and female lion tracks different? And the answer is simply size. So a male's tracks are much bigger, probably about a third the size again. A male track about the size of my hand. Now, I'm not a particularly large human being, but my hand is of average size. I'm not a gypsy. And so about the size of my hand, really. And the female's about a third the size, or a third smaller. And that's the front track. The back track's always slightly smaller, but still bigger than the females. I'm hearing some kind of radio communications. Oh, there we go. Right. Good news, everybody. Stefan has gone home. Well, that's not good news, but good news is that Jamie is out and about. She's heading to the hyena den. Let's get an update from her.
Good afternoon and welcome to our portion of a somewhat delayed start to our Sunset Safari. A Sunset Safari that is curiously beset by gremlins. It seems as though when James and Bryan return and Steph returns from the weekend, they just throw everything into considerable turmoil. I am, of course, joking, and it is wonderful to have the team back together once again. Now, I might be here as a temporary vehicle, given the fact that our car doctor, Opa, the wonderfully gifted mechanic, is going on leave tomorrow, which means that he has to get through both Jigga and Rusty at some point before the sun goes down and the gates close, and he has to delay the start of his leave, which he is understandably most reluctant to do. Rusty may have to return at any point in time, which means that at present we are limited as to where we can go, and I think, you know, twist my arm a little bit and we might just pay a visit to the hyena den. If they're not home or reluctant to see us, then we shall head through to Sydney's Dam and see what's happening there. Exciting times on the Sunset Safari. Rest assured, though, that the tech team is very much trying to stay on top of the gremlins that keep popping their heads out. In my head, what they've got going on at the moment is like a giant game of whack-a-mole, trying to whack everything that pops up out of nowhere, and every time they hit one gremlin, another gremlin seems to surface out of nowhere, possibly in the same place where we had problems just a few days ago. But they are working furiously to try and combat them, and I'm sure that they will be on top of things very soon. We do thank you, however, for your patience in sticking with us. It's been a most confusing afternoon for me. I got out ready to go on drive, then Steph was out on bushwalk, and then I was back on drive. It's a lovely afternoon, though. We shall go and see what we can find in our limited sphere of operations. Now, this morning we had some very interesting hyena action with one of the females from the den site, along with apparently one of the clan males, racing around for no apparent reason, sniffing very carefully in an area where something interesting had happened. I couldn't find a thing when I went to investigate it later, so I don't know exactly what it was that had them so very interested this morning. And there's also a third mystery hyena who I promise you I saw a hyena. It went behind a bush when I drew attention to it, and it never came out, and so we never managed to get it on camera. And I still don't know which particular hyena that might have been. Let's go across to the den and see whether, first of all, Pretty, one of the female that we saw this morning, has returned, and whether we've got any of the cubs out for a late afternoon gamble before heading to bed overnight. Oh, and I forgot, as I went to take Rusty out of the garage to get her out on drive, I put my foot flat on the accelerator and nothing happened, which is, well, something happened, but not what was meant to happen. And that's definitely a very disconcerting feeling. Luckily for us, it was just a spring that had jumped out. And the accelerator still functions perfectly, so if wild dogs come racing past us, we should be able to keep up with them. And actually, come to think of it, in all of this hubbub, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Janie, and this afternoon I have Liam on camera with me. Liam, who was initially on bushwalk, helping out Steph doing the camera work, and then for some behind the scenes filming as well. So Liam's also had something of a discombobulated afternoon. I'll have to find him a leopard to make up for it. Don't forget to send through your questions on #SafariLive on Twitter, or email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And now let us see if we can figure out what's been happening with these hyenas. I have a little bit of a suspicion that they might have moved to a different den site close to the one here, but not quite the one that we've been visiting the whole time. And of course, with just Brent and myself over the last few days, we haven't had a good opportunity to go out on bushwalk and actually double check that and to relocate them. It's one of the only real ways of locating a hyena den is to do it on foot. Just because you can't go bashing about without a direction off-road, without having somewhere in mind. But I would not be at all surprised if they haven't moved just next door to this den site, because this is not the den site that we very first found all those months ago on Aubrey's Road that they were using, back when June and Bella and the February twins were still young enough to be at a den site. A very good afternoon to Aaron, and Aaron would like to know whether I could continue my jackal streak and find you a jackal. I hope so, Aaron. They seem to be around Sandy Patch Road, and I'm sort of hoping that if we head across in that direction, we might get lucky and we might have a chance to see them. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and I'll certainly do my best, because that's right next to Sydney's Dam, which is where we were going to go anyway, if the hyena was all quiet, which unfortunately it looks as though it might be. Don't see the telltale flash of spots. Oh dear. Hyenas are invading us. What's up, Rusty? Nobody's home. How dreadfully disappointing. There's still hyena tracks all over Aubrey's Road, and that immediately tells me that they're still denning somewhere, or they're most likely denning in this area. When you look, it's one of the first things you look for in terms of relocating a hyena den, is tracks up and down the road closest to it. That's because hyenas, like other big predators, like to use the roads to navigate around areas. But nobody's home. At least I don't think so. I definitely don't see any cubs scampering about, and I don't see any adults sleeping off in the shade either. Okay. Well, we shall just have to go and search elsewhere. And while we navigate our way out of this hyena den, let's head back to James for an update.
So we've done a full circle and we're sort of heading back towards Buffalo Dam now. I have found no further evidence of lions, so they might be in this block here, but I can't really say that those things were that fresh. So we'll just keep having a fossick about the place and see what we can find, won't we, Bryan? No telltale flick of a pom-pom bedecked tail. Did you like how I used two different ways of tail there, Bryan? You noticed it? Yes. It was entirely by mistake, of course.
You're not supposed to admit that.
No, I shouldn't. You're right. That's quite interesting. Debbie, you say, what are my thoughts on Junior hooking up with the Nkuhumas again? And for those of you who don't know, of course, the Nkuhuma Pride are providing the bulk of our lion viewing. 5 lionesses, 2 little cubs now, and a male lion who is now, I think he's about 4.5, if I'm not mistaken. And he was supposed to have been tossed out of the area by the Birmingham Boys, the dominant male coalition. And the other day he was found feeding, if I'm not mistaken, on a buffalo carcass with the Nkuhuma Pride. And Debbie, you want to know what my thoughts on that are? My thoughts are that it's not entirely uncommon. I think that it's unlikely he'll survive around here unless, I mean, he will have to take on the Birminghams. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that on his own. I do believe that he will be a bigger lion than the Birminghams because his father is definitely larger than those Birmingham fellows. So, but I still don't believe territory himself. And that's not a bad thing, of course, because we don't. Sorry about that. We don't really want there to be too much inbreeding amongst the lions. They can cope with a little bit, but if he was to come back into the area, he will unquestionably try and mate with his, well, mother and sister and aunts. And that, of course, well, it's just not great for the genetic diversity of the lion population. Now, look at that. We've been away from here for, what, Bryan? 10 minutes. Not a buffalo in sight. All is peace again at Buffalo's Dam. That's where they were. They've melted off. Now, we did a loop around to the direction that you're looking there, which is to the north, and those buffalo didn't pop out. So I'm not sure where they're going to go. But all is peaceful again at Buffalo's Dam. The grey heron is still there. Now, Bill from New Jersey, you ask a very valid question. Are there any crocodiles in this water here? Bill, I don't know. I would say most likely not. Would I swim across this water in the absence of that hippopotamus? Absolutely no chance at all. Crocodiles move enormous distances, and you just never know where they're going to be. And I've told the story before, but I used to work at a place called Ngala, which is not too far north of us here, and there was a dam about half the size of this one, and there were no crocodiles in it, and a guide went along there on a hot summer's day, and he said, well, I don't know if he had guests or not at the time, but he said, you know, somebody asked him, were there crocodiles in there? And he said, no, there weren't any crocodiles. He'd never seen a crocodile in the dam before, and it was so hot that he got into the water. He now has one arm. So he was grabbed by a crocodile, unfortunately, took his arm clean off, just below the shoulder. He's quite a famous guide in Namibia, and he's written a number of books. And unfortunately for him, that's what happened. So, yeah, you wouldn't find me swimming across this water, even if I checked it out and checked it out again for crocodiles. Crocodiles are the stealthiest, and of course they do see us completely as prey in the same way as they would any other animal. Alrighty, I think we shall press on from Buffalo's Dam. Fire up the old Wendy. I'm just going to do one more loop around to the north, but like in a sort of figure of 8 from where we were. You will lose us briefly as we go through the dip here, but then we will return the other side. There is a male leopard track, which I don't think you're going to be able to see with a camera, I'm afraid. It's just the other side there, and I don't think it's distinct enough. No, sorry, Bryan. Yeah. We'll keep looking around here. Well, I think are going to lose signal, so let's head across to Jamie. She's at another waterhole.
All is quiet at Sydney's Dam. No jackal, unfortunately, Aaron. I was keeping my fingers crossed that they might be hiding up in the shade somewhere. They're interesting animals, jackals, because they are largely nocturnal. But if there's something interesting happening, as we saw the other day here at Sydney's Dam, when they were trying to steal bits of carcass from the hyenas, we noticed that they are pretty much active during the day at the same time. I'm going to try and carry on down Sandy Patch on our jackal quest. I have discovered another gremlin, but that's a gremlin, we'll address that later. The keys are stuck and rusty, but we can still turn them in one direction. We just can't fully turn the car off. That's all right, we only need it on for now. We'll cross that particular bridge when we come to it, when we get home this evening. Oh dear, it never rains, but it pours. Except now in the bush because it's sort of drought-stricken, but gremlin-wise it is pouring. Although those clouds, I hear James was actually commenting on them earlier, those clouds have become are a bit of a surprise. Coming from the east, which is also quite interesting. I wonder if we're not in for another strange, unexpected downpour like the one that we had the other day. Any jackals? They are territorial, so there is a good chance of seeing them in the same place since their territories are quite small. They are essentially filling a niche that is occupied by foxes in other parts of the world, or in American terms, very, very similar to coyotes. And Jesse, you were wondering whether or not the jackals are successful in urban environments in the same way that coyotes are. Not very much in the bigger cities. I mean, jackals are widely distributed throughout South Africa, but I have no memory of jackals wandering about at any point in any of the cities, the main cities.
Living next to my aunt's house in Pretoria.
Oh, there we go. So yes, Jesse, we have an answer from Viam, who tells me that there's a pair living next to his aunt's house in Pretoria, just a few kilometers north from where I grew up in Johannesburg. That doesn't surprise me, and I bet you in places, there's a main city in this area called Phalaborwa. I bet you there are lots and lots of jackal wandering about there, because that is where there is a gate to the Kruger, and it's not unheard of in Phalaborwa to be filling up your car with gas, petrol, and to see a jackal wandering, a lion wandering along the road, or a herd of elephants wandering along the road. Why, just the other day, an elephant decided that he wanted to try and travel to Hoedspruit, which is our home, basically. It's my home. I've been living there for the last 4 years. So yes, it seems most likely. I don't remember any around Johannesburg or Durban or Cape Town, but certainly it seems as though they are adaptable enough to make their way into cities like that. The same is true of leopards, believe it or not. There's a surprising, unexpected number, it seems, of leopards that seem to have taken advantage of the quiet of a city night out here, not out here, in the bigger cities. The stories of leopards living in abandoned apartment blocks. There was a leopard that lived in the storm pipe of the Ellis Park Stadium in Johannesburg, and basically not known about for a very long period of time. The leopard in the apartment block in Pretoria apparently even raised a litter of cubs successfully. It's surprising what wildlife lurks out there and how they make use of, or how they adapt to the presence of people in their homes. There's a famous story of the brown hyena that went wandering through, where was it? It was wandering through Randburg, I think, in Johannesburg. And there was a great fuss about it and lots of photos in the newspaper, as you can imagine, a hyena researcher actually called in and said they've been denning in one of the main motorway exchanges in Johannesburg. They've been denning there for the last 5 years or whatever it was. Amazing what we don't realize goes on in our cities. Unfortunately though, no sign of our jackal here. Since Impala Plains seems to be devoid of mammal life, let's go across to James, who has a large buffalo.
Well, it's the same herd of buffalo, everyone, but it's just coming across the border going into Buffelshoek. So we had a question the other day, really lost my mind on leave. We had a question just now about why it's called Buffelshoek. Well, there seem to be some buffels in it, and this is the property. They're heading north into Buffelshoek, and of course we don't go in there, but the animals are free to come and go as they please throughout the 8 million acres of the Greater Kruger National Park. And I'm just going to be quiet quickly. I don't know if you heard that. Bryan is nodding vigorously, indicating that he could hear it through these earphones. So those are the oxpeckers, everyone. We were chatting about oxpeckers earlier, and that's a sound that you really want to listen out for if you're ever on foot in the bush here. It indicates the presence of herbivores that may be as harmless as an impala, but of course it could mean buffalo or something even larger. Ooh, quickly, let's go across to Jamie.
We've happened upon the most incredible scene here. The crowned lapwings are attacking the Franklin. Look at them go. And the poor Franklin making sounds of distress. Oh! The poor hapless Franklin, I think, have just stumbled upon their nest site. Yes, run. Run. Shame. Feathers a bit ruffled along with their dignity. I don't think this particular family of crested Franklin will make that mistake again. And speaking from experience, you definitely do not want to mess with a nesting pair of crowned lapwings, which is apparently what these poor Franklin did. Yeah, help, 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 help. Terror from the skies. Attack by crowned lapwings. That is a first for me. I have never seen crowned lapwings quite so determined to attack a group of completely harmless crested franklins. I really don't know what that was about. Let's go and have a look at the proud pair that are now savouring their success, looking decidedly smug and moving quite far away, unfortunately. I'm surprised. I didn't expect them to have nests or eggs at the moment. They can be quite savagely protective.
There's actually a chick there.
Oh yes. There we go. Well done, VM. Thank you. Well, that explains that little attack. Just by in front of the pile of the elephant dung, running back towards the parent, is a tiny, tiny little crowned lapwing chick. And that explains that. I think there's just one in the shadow dashing about, unless there's a second one somewhere near the other parent. Now, having been savagely attacked by crowned lapwings before, when I inadvertently strayed into their nesting site, I sympathize with the Franklin. It can be quite intimidating for somebody of my size. I can only imagine what that must have been like for the poor Franklin. Now, a Franklin is unlikely to attack a lapwing chick. You never know, though. Every now and again, the strangest things happen out here in the bush, and it might have been that a francolin took exception to a lapwing chick. The reason that we didn't see it straight away was, first of all, because we were distracted by all of the action, but also the alarm calls of a female or a male lapwing, both of them play a role in raising their chicks, will immediately cause the chick to lie down completely flat. It pops its head completely flat, its wings down, covering its white belly, and it just lies completely still like that. And the feathers are so perfectly grass-coloured and soil-coloured that you would never ever spot it, unless you were an exceptionally keen-eyed predator. And then you know you have to risk the wrath of the parents. That was fascinating. It's the first time I've ever seen quite such a determined attack on a family of francolin. Very interesting sighting. Just goes to show that an open plain that initially seems devoid of animal life can occasionally result in some very interesting sightings. And since we drew you away from the buffalo before James was quite finished, let's head back there.
We're just moving into a better position as we welcome the second grade class at Rosemont School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Let me get this right. Mrs. Cahoon, Mrs. Gallup, Mrs. Murray, and Mr. Parker. Hello to you and to all the kids there in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Over there, we have some buffalo, and they are wandering through. You can see the green leaves, and they're just changing yellow. See how they're changing yellow? As you go into your summertime, so we've gone into winter. And all the leaves are turning yellow. And we're at the northeastern corner of what we call Nkuhuma. And Nkuhuma is a little piece of land, well, it's not that little, it's about 4,000 acres, piece of land in the western section of what is called the Kruger National Park. And the easiest way to describe that to you, everyone, is to say that it's a little bit like Yellowstone National Park. It's the same kind of thing, only it's about 3 times bigger than Yellowstone National Park. And this is not very similar to your American bison, but they're from the same family. And this is the African equivalent, if you like. And we're obviously very, very far away from where you are. We're a long way to the east and a long way to the south of where you are sitting in your classrooms there in Virginia Beach. And so it's much colder here than it is where you are right now. And also, it's a lot later in the day. You can see that the setting sun is just catching the ends of the trees there. There's ones glowing yellow. That's the last bits of the sun that are catching the tops of the trees. And you guys, of course, are only in the morning there. And that's one of the quirks of living here on planet Earth, of course, is that we don't all live at the same time. And they've just had their drink. We saw them having their drink a little bit earlier, and now these buffalo are wandering through this, what we call woodland. And you can see it's called woodland. Well, you see why it's called woodland, because there are lots of trees here, and they're eating the grass below the trees. And sometimes Bryan, who's on camera today, my name's James, by the way, Bryan is on camera, and Bryan said, oh, look at them, one of them's eating what we call a round leaf teak. And very few animals will eat the round leaf teak. And it's a special tree. There we go, well done, Bryan. That's the tree there. And we as human beings can use that tree, believe it or not, to treat troubles with our eyes. So if you have troubles with your eyes and your eyes are sore, then you can pick those leaves and you can soak them in water, maybe boil them up a bit, wait for the water to cool down, and then you can use it to soothe any pain that you have in your eyes. You can drop the water into your eyes. So that's what we call a medicinal use, a traditional use of many of the plants out here. And many, many plants here have got some kind of traditional medicinal use, because of course out here, for most of this area's history, there have been no doctors. There have only been what we call traditional doctors, and sometimes they're a lot more effective than the doctors that you have to go and see when you've got a sniffle in your nose. Right, we're going to move a little bit forward. I'm a bit confused as to what's going on. Can you go again with that, Kirsten? Does that mean we should reintroduce them? Ah, the school is not with us, so I shall speak. I shall speak normally to you guys. Now, the school apparently had the wrong link. I'm not sure what they were watching, possibly the Graham Norton show instead. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's carry on. The buffalo have disappeared. I can't believe it. I remembered all those names of the teachers. I was so proud of myself. Didn't get any of them wrong. I'm going to have to do it again, and I guarantee you I'll make a mess of it. I wonder what they were watching, Bryan. Right, now the second grade class of Rosemont School with Mrs. Gallup, Mrs. Cahoon, Mrs. Murray and Mr. Parker are watching us. I got it, Bryan, I got it right the second time round. And we, everybody, are watching some buffalo here. And I'm not going to tell you too much about them unless you have some questions, because we have been watching them for a little while, but these guys are very much the same as your American bison. You know what a bison is. There we go. And we're in an area called the Kruger National Park. And the Kruger National Park is 8 million acres. That's much bigger than Yellowstone National Park, for example, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. These buffalo just grazing off into the woodland, eating grass, sometimes a few leaves, and then they'll huddle together because it'll be a cold night tonight as you go into your summertime. So we've hit winter, and it'll be a chilly night tonight, probably dropping down to what we think is cold, maybe about 10 degrees Celsius, and 10 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit is probably about 52 degrees or so Fahrenheit. And that for us is very cold, and these buffalo won't like that. You can see they don't have a very thick coat. They've got pretty thin hair. Some of them, the old boys like this chap in front of us, you can see his skin, so he doesn't have much hair at all. So they'll gather together and they'll lie down in a big group, and that's how they'll stay warm during the winter time. There's no snow here. I don't think you get snow in Virginia Beach. I think there was snow once I think you told me, or someone from Virginia Beach told me. But there's no snow here, and I don't believe it's ever fallen in this area. So it never gets as cold as it does in the United States over here. That's a buffalo bull. That means he's a male. You can see that from the big helmet that he's got on his head. You can see he's got horns. All the buffalo have horns, the females and the males, but only the males have got that big helmet on top of the head that go with the horns. It's a very pleasant temperature at the moment, but the sun is about to set now. Now, Bryan is on camera, everybody. My name is James, and behind us, I don't want to move the car because it might give them a fright, but there's a female you can see behind us, and you might just be able to make out the fact that she doesn't have a helmet. You can see she's got nice shiny horns there. That means she's healthy, but you can see she doesn't have that big helmet on the top of her head. You can see her, there's one of the only animals that are able to eat the dry grass. You can see how dry that grass is. You can see her carrying a piece of dry grass. And one of the only animals that are able to eat such dry grass are the African buffalo. And remember, not the same as a water buffalo. And a water buffalo, of course, is found in Asia. And you can ask a teacher where Asia is. Let's go across to Jamie. She's my friend, and she's on the other part of the reserve. She's looking at our most common antelope, the impala.
Good afternoon and welcome to the students at Rosemont School. It is wonderful to have you all on board, and I hope that you have been enjoying your safari so far. And I've stopped at one of our most common antelope species because at the moment they've been doing something very interesting, and I'll tell you about that in 1 second. But just to introduce myself, my name is Jamie, and behind me, operating the camera and showing you all of these amazing scenes, is Liam. We also sometimes call him the wildebeest. That's his nickname. We've got a whole herd of impala walking across a big open clearing. The reason they're behaving quite interestingly right now is because it is mating season for them. So the males are chasing the females all around, making sure that they stay together in the group and making sure that all of the other males stay away. And although they might be our most common antelope, I also think that they are one of our most beautiful. These are all females. Only the male impala has horns. So the boy impala has horns, the girls do not. And that's because they don't need them. They don't need to use them to fight. And they'd much rather rely on running away from any predators rather than standing and fighting. Right now, they're just enjoying a very peaceful afternoon, and they feel quite comfortable walking through a clearing like this because they can see anything that might try and sneak up on them. So a leopard or a lion would have a hard job jumping out at an impala without being spotted first. So that's why they look so relaxed as they walk across the open area, stopping every now and again to just nibble on some grass. Aren't they beautiful? An impala. There are lots and lots of things waiting for us to find out here in the African bush. I think we should go and have a look. But before we do, McKenna, you were wondering about what the most common animal is that we see on safari. Well, I think, McKenna, that impala are probably the most common. There's also different types of birds that we very, very often see called hornbills, like zazu, very similar to zazu in The Lion King. And I'm sure that between James and myself, we can find a hornbill for you. But the impala are the most common mammal species that we see. We'll see them basically every single drive that we do, usually more than once on our safaris. All right, everybody, we've got to sit back down and sit tight, and we're going to start driving off. Let's see what we can find. And let's go and have a look at this. We are right now on the very far western side of Nkuhuma. Right on the western boundary, very, very close, in the middle of the Sabi Sands. And the birds I wanted to show you have almost completely flown off, but they're the ones making all of this noise. So if I switch off my engine quickly, you'll be able to hear them whistling away. Called magpie shrikes. I can't see one at the moment, but I can hear them chirping and whistling away. And oh, there's a hornbill. We spoke about the most common bird. There is a hornbill that's about to come out onto the road. There he is there, hopping along with his tail in the air and his bright red beak. Oh, run, 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 run. That is a red-billed hornbill. Oh, and he got a fright. The other birds scared him a bit. As we go and search for more wonderful things to show you, Jasmine, you were wondering what it's like being with all of the animals. And Jasmine, I think I must be probably one of the luckiest people in all the world, because I get to see animals each and every single day of my life. and I get to spend time watching them behave just as they would normally, even if I wasn't there. I think that is my favorite thing about this, and I feel lucky each and every single day, whether it's watching the most common antelope, the impala, or if it's sitting with a herd of elephants. And sometimes it's sad, because sad things happen in the wild every now and again, but mostly it's happy. And sometimes it can be a little bit scary, but most of the time it is just really, really exciting, just waiting to see what they're going to do next. And because it's all wild, it means that although we can guess at what the animal's going to do next, we never really know, and sometimes they do such unexpected things that it takes us completely by surprise. All right, I hope everybody's sitting nice and tight. It can get a bit bumpy out here. We've got lots and lots of different animal characters that we have got to know and we've got to love, because of course some of the animals are territorial or live in the same spot. And Cami, you were wondering whether or not we get to name the animals. Sometimes, yes, we absolutely do. Now, some of the animals already had names when we started working here, and some of them are named by the other guides who work in this area. So, for example, there is a leopard that is known as the Queen of Juma, and her name is Karula, which means peace or peaceful. She is 12 years old, and the people who've been watching these safaris for years have come to know and love her. And then we've had a really nice chance to name the different hyenas of the hyena clan, which is also very special. And that's a combination of us and our audience, the people who watch all across the globe. They've also had a chance to name some of the animals. And then if there's a special character, for example, there is an impala that we have called Nelson. And we've named him Nelson, and we always know it's him because he only has one horn and one eye. We call him Nelson the impala, and we see him very regularly. Let's go across to James, who has a different antelope for you. This one is a little bit fluffier.
So everybody, this is one of 9 antelope species that we get here, and you can see she can hear me calling, and her fur has got very long as the weather has got colder. I've been away for the last little while, and that's called a waterbuck. And that's a female waterbuck, and I'm just going to slowly roll forward. I don't want to give... Ooh, she got a fright already. They're very nervous, you know. The animals out here, just like in most wilderness areas where there are lots of predators, they're very nervous. They're constantly looking and listening and smelling to see if there are any predators around. Now what we're going to do is go around the corner. I've got a very special sight to show you. Everybody should see this live one day. So one day I hope that you'll be able to come out here and experience what I'm going to show you for yourselves. Just a little bit up the road here. Here we go. There's a... You can't really see it from here. Shall I go back a bit, Bryan?
That's nice.
There, everybody, is an African sunset. Now, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of pictures of those over the time that you're on planet Earth. But I would ask you to do yourself a favor one day and tell your parents you want to come and see one for real, because when you see the great big African sun setting like that behind the western horizon, it makes you feel very special. All the way from the toes to the tip of your head and all the way down to your fingers, you feel a little tingling sensation when you see an African sunset like that. Isn't that nice, Bryan? So everybody, what I want you to do now is to breathe in deeply through your nose. Go. And pretend you're in Africa, and you'll feel just as good as Bryan and I feel right now. Isn't that nice? Now, Nathan, you had a question. You wanted to know how or why we scare the animals. Well, Nathan, what happens is, how do we not scare the animals? Well, we have to move very carefully around them. Now, I don't know if you've been around animals much or if you've seen a bird in your garden, perhaps at home, but if you were to approach a bird, how would you approach it if you didn't want it to fly away? You would move very, very slowly towards it. You wouldn't make any noise at all, and you'd want to kind of give the impression to the bird that you meant it no harm. And that's what we do with all the animals out here. We try to move slowly towards them, and we try and do it as quietly and in a way that doesn't make any kind of noise and makes them think that we're not a threat or a predator. Now, a predator, of course, would be something like a lion or a leopard, which would behave in a certain way. So, for example, with those buffalo, if there was a lion or a leopard there, it would be hiding behind a rock or behind a tree, trying to see where the buffalo were going. And if the buffalo spotted it, then they would be very scared and they'd probably run away. Now, if you're a human being and you're walking and you see a buffalo, if you duck behind a tree and hide from it, then the buffalo thinks that you are behaving like a predator. But if you keep walking and you walk away and you're quiet and you don't make like you're moving towards the animal, then it doesn't feel threatened by you. So that's how we try and make animals unafraid of us. But of course, a car like this, we're in a vehicle and it makes a big noise and it smells very funny. And so the animals can be a little bit scared, but then after a while they get used to the vehicle. Right, let's drive along here. Hello, Brooke. You want to know if people ride the animals here? Brooke, no, you can't ride the animals out here. The animals here are not like domestic animals. In the same way that you don't go around the corner in Virginia Beach and climb on a white-tailed deer or on an elk or something like that, you know that they wouldn't let you do that. They're not like ponies. So, no, we don't ride the animals out here. There are parts of the world where domestic animals or wild we know that they ride elephants in India, of course, and we also know that there have been times when zebra, you know what a zebra is, it's like a stripy pony, when they have been ridden by people. But no, out here we don't ride any of the animals. We actually try and have as little effect on their lives as possible. So we don't touch any of the animals, we don't interfere with nature for as much as possible. Sometimes it's very hard not to interfere. Niall, somebody's been telling you what in this country is known as a pork pie. There's an elephant. That's very exciting. It's a young elephant bull, everyone. Niall, I'll get back to your question now. Isn't that nice? Now, he's huge. None of you, can you see where his front leg meets his body? That's his elbow. None of you would be as tall as his elbow. You'd all be able to walk straight underneath him. That's how big he is. I imagine Mr. Parker, Mrs. Cahoon, Mrs. Gallup, and Mrs. Murray would they wouldn't be able to walk. They'd probably reach about a third of the way up his body. That's about how tall he is. Now, Andrew, you want to know what an elephant weighs. Well, Andrew, you know that you don't weigh the same as your dad. You weigh much less than your dad, unless your dad is very small and you've been eating too many McDonald's burgers, but I don't think that's the case. And so it's difficult to answer. A little elephant, when it's born, Andrew, weighs about 220 pounds, if you can believe it. 220 pounds when it's born. Now, the average human being, of course, weighs, I think, in pounds about maybe 12 pounds. It's quite a big baby, about 12 pounds. So it's really enormous. And then a big male elephant, a big bull elephant, when he's fully grown, will weigh 6 tons. Now, 6 tons is about 14,000 pounds. Can you believe that? 14,000 pounds. Now, this one is probably about, I'd say he's about maybe 17 or 18 years old, so he's probably about 4.5 tons, which is about 10,000 pounds. So even though he's not as big as he is going to get, he's still very big and still much heavier than any other animal out here. Wood. You can see they eat quite a lot of wood, do our elephant friends. And Seth, you want to know if we feed the animals. Well, Seth, you can see we don't have to feed the animals. That's done by nature. Sometimes if it gets very, very dry and all the grass dies and all the leaves have fallen off the trees, then we do what we call provide a salt lick. And a salt lick is like a great big block of salt. And we just pop that down, and sometimes some of the animals come and lick that. But that's very seldom that we do that. Mostly there's plenty of there's plenty of food out here for the animals to eat. And in the case of an elephant, Seth, do you know how much they eat every day? A big bull elephant, when this chap is finished growing, and that will, well, he'll never finish growing, they grow until they die, but when he's about 35 years old, he will eat about 660 pounds of food every day. Isn't that a lot? 660 pounds of food every single day. Now, I imagine that most of you probably don't weigh as much as 60 pounds. You probably weigh about 40 pounds. So imagine 10 of you gathering, in fact 12 or 13 of you gathering together and weighing yourselves together. That's what an elephant eats in one day. Isn't that amazing? Here he comes. You see how he opened his ears there? That's because he's listening to my voice. I'm speaking quite loudly. And there he is, just walking with the setting sun behind him. Isn't that pretty? And you can't even hear him walk. We've got very good microphones on the camera. And I'm just going to be quiet. Just have a listen, see if you can hear him. Can you hear him? Might just be able to hear him scraping past that bush there. And otherwise, all you heard was what's called a crested francolin. Tick-a-dare, 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 tick-a-dare. The elephant, despite its enormous size, is able to move so very quietly. And look how cleverly he disappears. You see how brilliantly coloured he is. A grey is a very good colour. Beverly, you want to know if it's really hot or really cold here. Well, Beverly, it's not freezing, but we are going into winter, and that means it's going to get pretty chilly around here. Our minimum temperature every year is about 4 degrees Celsius, which in your language is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But in summer, it's very, very hot here. It goes up to 106 degrees sometimes, 106 degrees Fahrenheit, so then it gets very hot. But at the moment, we're in winter, so it'll go between 50 degrees in the early morning and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It can be at around 75 to 76 degrees Celsius, at least Fahrenheit. Now he's digging. You see, he's digging with his foot. Let's move a little bit forward. We might get another view of him, otherwise we'll leave him be. There we go. Now he's shaking his head there because he doesn't like the sound of the vehicle. So that was a shake. It's exactly the same as one of you getting cross with each other, and maybe you kind of, you know, when you shake your hands together and you go, mm! That's basically what he was doing there, saying, I don't like the sound of that car. And then when we turned off, he became calm. Alyssa, you say, do we ever pet the animals out here? No, Alyssa. We're in a wild area here. We can't pet the animals. None of them will let us get close enough. And we don't want to get close enough. We don't want for them to think of us as, we don't want to be out of a wild system. We want this to be as wild as possible. And we don't want the animals to become too familiar with us. Because wild animals, when they get too familiar with human beings, they can become dangerous. And that, of course, is the very last thing in the world that we want. Now you can see it's about, it's probably about 20 past 5 in the afternoon. So it's not late, but you can see the sun has already set. And out here, where you are, when the sun goes down, you've probably still got quite a lot of light left. And you call that twilight. Out here, when the sun goes down, it's almost like a light switch going off. We only get about 20 to 25 minutes of light before it's completely pitch dark and the starry African sky starts to twinkle above our heads. All right, Bryan, shall we move on? Yes. We'll say goodbye to our elephant friend. He's disappearing into the bush there, finding his supper. And of course, he's all on his own, because the males do live on their own. Often the young males like that will have a few friends that they move around with, but he obviously, maybe he's had a fight with his friends, and that's why he's on his own. Let's go across to Jamie, find out what she's looking at, and I'll head along in this direction.
It's starting to get a little bit colder now as the sun sets and it starts to get dark, and it's the perfect time for leopards and lions to get up and start stretching, maybe yawn a few times, lick their paws, and then get up to start their nightly hunting. There are lions and leopards will move about during the day, but mostly they are nocturnal animals, which means that they do most of their walking about and hunting at night. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what's making me sneeze. I think that it's the dust. Sorry if I gave you a fright. William, on the subject of lions, you would like to know if the lion population is increasing. And the answer is... I need to sneeze again, I'm sorry. Don't quite know what's making me sneeze quite so much. William, the lion population stays roughly the same because there's something called a carrying capacity. In other words, if you have too many lions, then there's not enough food to support them, and there's just too many in one area for access to resources, and they start to get into big fights with each other in order to find themselves a nice territory. So the lion population has stayed very does little ups and downs the whole time. However, because we're in a drought at the moment, it means that all of the animals have to go to limited places to go to the water hole. What that means is that the lions can lie in wait around the water hole, and life becomes a lot easier for them because they don't have to go too far away in order to look for food, and they know that the food will have to come to them. And I think I might need to sneeze again. I don't know where this came from. I think it's hay fever. It's taken me completely by surprise. Now, Chloe, you were wondering on the subject of lions if lions will ever eat other lions. And Chloe, no, hardly ever. The only time a lion will kill another lion is for competition. So it will almost always be a male trying to establish himself, or a couple of males trying to establish themselves in a territory. And sometimes when that happens, if they do kill a lion, they might eat a little bit of it, but they're not killing for food. They are killing because they want to get rid of the competition, and so that they can have a chance for their own cubs to survive and not the cubs of other lions. So it might seem really sad situation, but it's important because it keeps the lions from mating with their mothers and their sisters and their granddaughters or anything like that, and make sure that the genes are kept nice and fresh, because they're wild animals, so they make sure that they move about a lot and don't inbreed. Unfortunately for the students at Rosemont, your safari has come to an end. I'm going to have to say goodbye to you all. I hope that one day you'll have a chance to go on a real safari, or at least come and join us on the back of our safari once again. Have a wonderful rest of your school drive, and I'm going to send you back across to James. Bye-bye.
So we've just come along basically back towards Buffalo Dam, everyone. Just one final road that I haven't driven yet to see if maybe those lions don't pop out there. And then we'll head back towards the west. Of course, we know now need some lighting, given that the hour is dark, Bryan, isn't it?
It is.
Yes. Let's check out this powerful spotlight. That's how we spotlight, isn't it, Bryan?
It is. I've also joined it in here.
Very effective. Look, yes, we'll spot everything with these spotlights, won't we? I'm just going to be quiet for a second because I've missed this sound. It's the drongos making their last call. And they're imitating various other birds, and often they like to imitate the pearl-spotted owl, but they just do a little piece of the call, they don't do the whole thing. And you know what it's doing? Can you hear it going, pew, 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 pew? It's doing, that's a magpie shrike it's trying to be. Sorry, Cool Abe, I'm going to ask Kirsten for your question again. I'm afraid I missed it. Ah, Cool Abe, you want to know if we get drongos? Well, that's them there, yes, calling. The fork-tailed drongo. I'll try and find you one. You know, Cool Abe, at this time of the year, or this time of the day, sorry, they often sit on the ground. They'll, just as it gets dark, they'll sit in an open clearing, and the road is in, well, sort of unnatural clearing, but they will sit in a clearing like this. So we may well see the black shape of the fork-tailed drongo sitting on the road in front of us. Perchance a chameleon. I saw 3 chameleons on the second last drive that I did. Something is in this bush. It's not a leopard, everyone. What is that, Bryan? You see what I'm looking at? Down a bit? What's that white bit? Oh dear, I'm going to have to look. I bet I'm going to embarrass myself horribly because I almost guarantee you that it's nothing worth looking at. Lions. A long way away. Sounds like could be at Sydney's Dam, maybe. Anyway. It's not nothing at all. It's an egg sac. It's an egg sac of a spider, I think. And, no, not a spider. It could be a spider. I don't know. I don't know what kind of an egg sac it is. Definitely an egg sac. And the clever adult has pulled leaves over it so you wouldn't really see it. And that's why it looks like a sort of piece of nougat. See that, Bryan? Delicious nougat. Delicious. You like nougat?
I do.
No, I do too. Many people do not, of course. They're the sort of people that like marshmallows. Do you like marshmallows?
On the occasion.
No, Bryan. It's disgusting. Do you like meringues?
What was the last time I had a meringue?
Yes. Meringues. And please, just remember, you can still send in questions. The school kids are away. They're probably in maths class, fast asleep. But for those of you who are not, please do send through your questions. #SafariLive, questions at wildearth.tv. We have another half hour or so of the drive. And often these night drives can be quite quiet, but we may be lucky to see something. We may see a lion or a leopard or a genet or a civet, even if we're very lucky, a badger perhaps. Jamie had an African wildcat the other day, but that was in the middle of the day, which is absolutely incredible. But when we don't see such things, it's always a nice opportunity to talk about other aspects of safari or Africa, clear up any misconceptions about Africa you might have, about the people of this great continent, or whatever else there might be to say. There are 2 steenbok, which we can't shine on. Just remember, we won't shine the lights on diurnal animals, animals active during the day. We don't want to give the predators an unfair advantage. And likewise, if we do find a predator that is hunting, we will not shine on that either. I don't remember the last time I spotted a chameleon live. The last 3 that I saw, we were coming back from Cheetah Plains after we'd closed down. You guys were all having your dinner or your lunch, depending on where you are in the world. And I spotted 3 and there were no witnesses. David refused to tell anybody when we got home. It was all very embarrassing. Oh well. Bryan, you wouldn't do that to me, would you?
No, never do.
No, you wouldn't. No.
Celebrate your life.
Exactly. You would revel in my success. Oh, lovely question from Aaron in New Zealand. You want to know what I think of Sindile's release? I'm not clearing my voice because of the question. I'm clearing because I've got a frog in it. Aaron, I'm quite excited about it. I'm apprehensive because I don't know that he will survive, because I think it's a difficult area for him to come into, given the number of leopards that there are in this area. There's something up ahead of us there, other than the tree that nearly decapitated me. Oh, jeepers, I'm being attacked by the aerial. Hang on. Oh, it's a duiker. I'm just going to put this down, everybody, before it takes out my eyes. That would be very unpleasant, Bryan.
It would be.
I met a one-eyed man 2 nights ago, actually. He had a glass eye. It's very strange. Anyway, it's got nothing to do with the current topic of discussion. So, Aaron, I'm a little worried about him because obviously there are lots of male leopards here, there are lots of other leopards here. It's quite a densely populated leopard area. So I don't know that he'll survive. On the other hand, I think it's really exciting, and I know that it hasn't been attempted too often, where a male leopard is simply released into the wild again to see if he can fend for himself. I think that the chances are pretty good that he will be able to. Will he become territorial in this area? Well, I don't know about that. He's already moved a pretty substantial difference. I was worried about his level of fitness, level of physical fitness, because obviously he's been in an enclosure for the last 6 months. And that means, of course, that he hasn't been moving around. Now, the cats don't move around if they can avoid it, but out here they can't avoid it. They have to move around. And so, yeah, I don't know about... it seems that he's already moved, many tens of kilometers, so maybe his fitness is not an issue. He's... we're in such early days. What are we? We're about a week after his release, maybe a bit more. But we'll keep you posted. I've got to tell you, I had visions of driving around a corner and finding him, and we'll easily recognize him because I think he's got a collar on him, and so we'll very easily recognize him, even though he'll be substantially larger than when we last saw him. And that would be, that would just be very exciting, wouldn't it? So let's see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen when he meets his mother. I guess it's fairly inevitable that he will meet his mum. I think leopards are a bit more intelligent than many of the others, cats, and I suspect that they may well recognize each other. I don't think that will necessarily result in a great and affectionate reunion, but certainly I think they may well recognize each other, and that will reduce any aggression that there might be. Right, while I continue to look hopelessly for chameleons, let's head across to Jamie and hang on 1 second. It's a leaf. Across to Jamie to see if she can't find you something other than a leaf.
James is a brave man searching for hyenas, chameleons at this time of year. I don't think I've seen, first of all, I didn't see that many in summer. only really had a few good chameleon sightings. Most of them are hiding up at the moment. It's a little bit cold. Oh, leave. Oh, come on, Rusty. Here we go. It was far too difficult. Apart from the fact that Rusty sounds like some kind of Harley Davidson or something going up the hills. Now, while James is on a chameleon search, I am making a concerted effort for aardvark. I've come to the places where we regularly see aardvark tracks, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed because, as most of you will know, I have yet to see an aardvark in the wild. It's one of those bizarre things. It's just become the animal that seems to try and evade me no matter what I do or where I search. And I'm hoping that tonight might change all of that. I'm going to check all of the old aardvark burrows that I know have been active in the past, where I've seen the freshly dug areas. But we have a surprise for you. James has something up his sleeve. It is not a chameleon, but something entirely different. We'll go and have a look at James's largest cat.
Look, Bryan, look in the tree over there. It's a chameleon. She was calling, everybody. As we came round the corner, she was calling, I think in response to the one that I heard, unless the one that I did hear was just the end of her first call. She was making a lovely call, and I'm pretty sure these are the tracks that we saw a little bit earlier. She is, of course, now gone to sleep. I suspect she'll call again while she's just lying there. Let's move a little bit closer. We'll just go around the corner here, because to hear a lion in close proximity calling is amazing, male or female. Some people will tell you they can tell the difference between the calls. I maintain that I can't. I don't know the difference. Unless you hear them next to each other. If I hear them next to each other, I can tell the difference. Is that all right, Bryan? Mm-hmm. She's hearing another one. Do you see how her ears were pinned back as we pulled in here? Now she's turned her head to where she's heard something. Maybe she'll call again. It would be so wonderful. First night back, lion calling. Who is this? Who is this? This is not Amber Eyes. I mean, I'm 95% sure that this is a member of the Nkuhuma pride. She's got the slightly pinkish nose, that's the one. She's lovely, isn't she? Looks... Listen, here we go. It wasn't very impressive. It was like a little burp. Okay, now everybody, if she does call again, what I would very much like you to do is turn up your speakers as loud as you can, and then shut your eyes. Whenever I had guests on the back of the car, what I would do is kill the lights as the lion started to call. And at night, that can be, if you're not prepared for it, it can be tremendously eerie, with the sound of a lion's roar echoing around you. And so try and recreate that experience for yourselves. If you've got good headphones, put them in, and then turn them up loud when she calls again, because it really is a tremendously loud sound. If you're sitting this distance from her, we're about, here we go. Isn't that cool? I'm just going to call it in quickly, everybody. They can hear this line. Stations, I've just located that other lioness. She is about 200 meters from the junction with Quarry Pan Road and Buffalo Dam. She's in those little clearings there, visible from the road. So there's another one calling from Mvubu Road. So Sandy, very nice question from you, of course, while we're sitting here with this lioness. You say, can she call as loudly as a male? I'd have to say, especially having just heard her call, no. I don't think she can. It's certainly, it's loud, it's an impressive sound, and it would have travelled probably at least, say, 3 miles. But, yeah, a male will travel further. So I'm just trying to find out on the radio what's going on here. Sorry, are any stations making their way to this lioness off Quarry Pan Road? Okay, copy that. So we'll sit with her and see what she does from now, I think. And we'll just see if we can't hear another lioness answering her. So just to keep you updated, I keep going silent because the radio goes. There is a lion that has been found close to the junction of Mvubu Road and the Buffalo Cut Line, which from where we're sitting now is about 2 kilometers, which is about 1.2 miles towards the sort of setting sun, towards the west. So basically, if you look behind your head, basically, if you imagine your head, you're facing east now, and then there's another one. Steph's heard another sort of bout of activity around the Nkuhuma Dam, which is the same distance in a southwesterly direction. So it sounds like there are 3 or 4 lions around the place. Obviously, they're all calling and trying to get into contact with each other. Now, I don't know how many of you managed to shut your eyes and turn up your sound, but I hope you did. And I know many of you thought that the sound was amazing. It is. There are a few things in life, of course, around Africa that, I mean, there are thousands, but there are very few things like an African sunset or a lion's call at sunset that really give you a kind of touch or a feeling of this great continent. Now this other lion is calling, they say. I'm hearing on the radio basically where I described it. So Jamie's quite close to there. I think she'll probably head that direction and see if she can't find whatever is calling there. But this particular one didn't respond at all there. She didn't respond at all, did she? She was just lying there, Bryan. Exhausted after calling once. And just see her eyes moving slightly. And Aaron, you turned up your headphones there in New Zealand and you said it was amazing. It is. It really is a heart-stopping sound, especially if you are in the dark of an African night with just the odd star providing prickles of light overhead. But to hear that in the pitch black darkness when you can't see anything is just an astounding sound. Now, is this the mother? Well, I don't know. It could be. She's come out of Torchwood, which we know is the area where the cubs are, but we won't know that until she flips over and we can see whether she's suckling or not. I'm just going to talk to Mike on the radio. He's trying to get in here. Go ahead, Mike. No, Mike, it's on Quarry Pan Road. So come from Buffelshoek Dam towards Quarry Pan Road.
Okay, copy that. Thank you.
Yeah, she can hear a lion calling again, definitely. That's why she's picked her head up. Now, I can't hear that from where I'm sitting. So she's very clearly got much, much better ears than we do. Let's just see what she does. Yeah, she's heard another one calling. See if she responds. There we go. Isn't that just fantastic? And I don't know if you could hear it. I mean, it's slightly not as loud, or slightly less loud than a male's call, but it's unbelievably impressive. And the other thing that, I mean, each lion has got a fairly distinctive sort of tone to their call, and they can recognize each other's calls. But one of the distinctive things about her call is that when she breathes in again, her entire rib cage, you can hear it moving. It goes, so she breathes out, she exhales and pushes the air out through her voice box, and it makes a tremendous rasping sound. Then as she sucks the air in again, you can actually hear her rib cage moving back, going kind of thumping back into place. And that'll be distinctive to her. I've not heard it in another lioness. And I heard a lion call on the weekend at Pinder, a big male lion. And he had a kind of, you know, when they get to the end of their call and they go, oh, oh, oh. He had a kind of double at the end. He went, oh, 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 oh. So he was completely distinctive. She's not very impressed by my impression there, Brian. You see that?
Yeah, I did.
Rank amateur is what her eyes said to me there. So we've got a fairly dim light on her, everyone, and that's because unless she's moving through the bush and we're desperately trying to keep with her, it's much better to just leave her in slightly dimmer light rather than put this very bright spotlight on her. So her colour is not quite what you think it is. Might be time for a picular, Brian.
Ooh.
Hello, Mike. While we wait and see if she doesn't call again before we have to leave you, you want to know how far can a lion walk in the night? Well, Mike, a lion can walk far. In this area, they don't walk very far. In this area, probably no more than 5 kilometers or so, which is really impossible. I'm really going to have to work out my conversions again. Say 3.5 miles, Mike. Be unlikely that she'd move much more than 3.5 miles in a night. But potentially, I mean, in an area like the Kalahari, you'll find big male lions moving at least sort of, I don't know, up to 25 kilometers sometimes, which of course is, well, that's pretty far. Yes. Jamie's still looking to see if she can't find the other one, because it keeps calling from somewhere around Vuyatela Dam. And in fact, the other lioness has created a great conflagration of people trying to find. And somebody else is coming this way. Yes, you can see she's sorry, you can hear that she's calling. Now, stations just come straight down Gwaripan Road. You'll get us visual on the eastern side of the road. I hope she calls again. It is just the most wonderful sound. And it's territorial. People often say, oh, is she hunting when she starts roaring? Which, of course, if you think about it, is not really sensible, because they're stalking hunters. She doesn't want to let everyone know that she's around, so she's clearly not hunting. And from her sort of the fact that she's alone and she's looking around and listening, it tells me that she's trying to find where the rest of the pride are. The fact that she's not moving towards them makes me think that maybe she is the mother. Does anybody know which female gave birth? I don't think it was Amber Eyes, although I think she was pregnant. So it could well be this one. And I suspect, her torchwood is basically behind her. And I wonder if her reticence to move isn't because her cubs are there. Here she goes again. So cool. Isn't that lovely? It was a very half-hearted call there, sort of yawn call. And all around us the winter night is starting to sound, so there's very little sound at all. There's just a few crickets. And I can just hear the tip, 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 tip of bats flying above us. But otherwise, very quiet. And she's listening. I think she'll start to move at some stage during the night. Well, she doesn't look that enthusiastic about movement at the moment. Here we go. I don't know, Bryan, did you hear the ribs going chink, chink? Yeah. You hear that?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the cartilage in her ribs sort of slipping back.
Yeah, after every roar. Ooh,
Yeah.
chink.
And that's very distinctive. I've not heard it before. So that'll distinguish her. If we hear a lion calling in the distance, that's who we'll know. That's how we'll know if it's her or not. Here come two other vehicles, which is absolutely fine. Especially as it made her show us her pretty face like that. Oh, and there's a Scops owl calling behind us. Move straight in, guys. Come around the back of me, and then you'll get a good view. So that's just me talking on the radio. If you are a new viewer, we are in constant radio contact with a number of other game drives that drive on this reserve and on other reserves. And so when we find sightings, we share them, and likewise everyone else shares the sightings that they have as well. Move forward with pleasure if you want.
Thanks very much.
Let's see if she calls again, everyone. It'll be a nice closing for our drive. Oh, here we go. Let's look underneath her. She doesn't seem to have very swollen teeth. Move back a bit so that Mike's guest can see. Now everybody, just before we leave you, which will be in 1.5 minutes, remember tomorrow morning we're going to start half an hour later, so the drive will start at 6:30 our time. The intimidating number of time zones that you all exist in precludes me telling you what time that will be, but it'll be 30 minutes later than we had today. And that will probably be for the next 60 days or so as we go towards August. Now I'm not going to move because we've only got a minute left, and let's just see if she calls nicely again. She's obviously decided to position here better the other lions that have been calling. Wonderful picture there. All right, everyone, that's going to be it from us, and we'll see you tomorrow at 06:30. Thank you, Bryan, for your efforts today. Welcome back from leave. Welcome back to Kirsten. Big thank you to Kirsten, of course. Final control with Cheesecake Cherry, and Steph briefly today, and Jamie out with Jean-Andre, I think it was. We'll see you tomorrow at 06:30. Wonderful to be back here in the bush with you, and what a treat to have these lions calling. See you at dawn.